Good evening, and welcome to another episode of the Zeitgeist Lab Collections Podcast, another edition of the United States Canada Free Exchange of Podcast Content. I am joined tonight by my distinguished co-host Brian, and our always very special and incomparable guest Jordan Lane. Gentlemen, how are we this evening?
I'm doing good. You were really confident about who is starting this episode.
I always start these because it's a spinoff of my season. It's very clear who starts
Yeah,
these.
that makes sense. Yeah,
It's me.
Yeah, that wasn't the stated rule, so I was like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. But yeah, I feel like the last recording sessions, like we've always been awkward about it, like who starts first. But
because it's a Patreon episode, so there's no defined rule. But this is very clear. This
right, yeah,
spinoff
no,
of
your
my
reasoning makes
season.
sense. Yeah, no, I understand. It's been explained to me now, so I will.
And you'll forget next time. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
I feel like you two have had this exact discussion before.
We have. I'm sure if I go back to the last time we did this, like 9 months ago or whatever, the intro is pretty much identical.
It has been a little while. Well, it's a pleasure to be back. It's great to be in the same virtual room as you two gentlemen again. Always a pleasure to see your faces. And always a pleasure to talk about something that I really like that not a lot of people know about, which today is the album The Moon by Ottawa's Wooden Stars.
Yes. So
this was something that was told to me about 45 minutes ago.
No.
Oh, come on.
You've been told about this multiple times over the last few months.
Scroll up that thread. It's definitely linked in there multiple times.
I didn't want to scroll up.
He doesn't scroll up. Usually he'll just direct message me, like outside of our conversation, like, what are we listening to again? I'm like, come on. But what I was going to say in our chat, which I decided to hold back on, was like 2 days ago we talked, I think, Brian, maybe 3, and you were like, yeah, I listened to it already because I figured I might as well. But what I saw in the chat tonight would suggest you did not listen to it before like 10 minutes ago.
I just wanted to make sure I was gonna listen to the same album again. I forgot the title, but I just wanted to make sure I wasn't accidentally listening to like another album. So yeah, I listened to this about an hour ago just to like freshen up on it because we attempted to record this at least 87 times
or more.
I've listened to this at least 3 times now.
So yeah,
but
I mean,
it's spaced over such a significant amount of time.
Well, today's December 1st, and I believe that our first attempt at recording this was the last week in July.
Oh my god!
Because it was right before. Because the first week in August, I traveled to Maryland with my son to visit my grandmother. I remember I really wanted to get this out of the way before we left, and I got sick. And then we scheduled like a couple times in August and once in September, and then I don't even think we tried in like October and November. But yeah, we've been trying since July to get this one in the can.
I know all of us have been sick at least once.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah.
So, but before we get into the album, I want to take you back to July. And I don't know if you're going to remember this, but this is actually something I've been thinking about since the middle of July, which is said.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because when we had a scheduled date in July, and like 2 or 3 days before that, before everything blew up, you said at the top of our next episode, you wanted to question my credentials as a poli-sci Alex. And we never visited that. So I was wondering if you could like kind of tell me if you remember.
There were 2 things.
Oh man, what was it? It was something to do with some world event. It was like literally, it was something absurd. Like you were like, you hadn't heard of like the Berlin Wall or like the Salt Treaty or something like that. Like it was like a real like geography 101 kind of thing that you made a reference in an episode to not knowing, and I was like, what the fuck? Like, I know I wrote it down somewhere, but
first of all,
it's for the life of me
poli-sci Alex, not geo-sci Alex. So if it's geography 101, I'm gonna say I don't care if I don't know that. And I know what the Berlin Wall is, so I would really be interested. I'm disappointed you don't remember what it was that you wanted to call me out on.
Honestly, I'm disappointed too. I'm just going through my documents folder right now, though, hoping I've got something called like ZG. Oh my god, I do have something called ZG.txt. Here it
Okay,
is.
let's see.
Yes, Alex, how are you, poli-sci Alex? And you have never heard the phrase "mutually assured destruction." This was to do with the SALT treaties. This was Reagan and Gorbachev.
I've heard
Mutually
of that
assured destruction,
phrase.
nuclear brinksmanship.
It's
You
from
said on the
Community.
episode.
It's from Community.
Oh my god.
Professor Duncan says it to Chang in the season 2 finale or season 1 finale or something. I've heard of the phrase, just not within a political context.
How have you not heard it in a political context that I have?
I don't know. Well, okay,
how many college degrees do you have?
One. I have one.
I have
college
0
degree. Okay, but I will admit I have no idea what the SALT treaties are. What is that?
That was the basically the anti-nuclear proliferation talks in the 80s. Between Reagan and Gorbachev.
See, I think, do you have like a bent towards Soviet era history? Because I believe on one of these episodes you used the term
glasnost
or perestroika or something. Like,
I think it's a function of how old I am. Because I was 7 when the Berlin Wall came down. So about 5 years later, when I'm like, grade 6, grade 7, this stuff is in textbooks by now. Mm-hmm. So I was learning a lot about the stuff that was happening in the kind of late 80s, a little bit later when I was going through school. So that was current events at the time and kind of like global politics. So that stuff sticks out because it was like fairly important. So
gotcha. Okay. All right, well, I'm glad you found that text document, and we could learn why apparently I should change my. Well, I've always said it stands for polite scissoring, Alex. So I've never claimed it stood for political science. Whatever.
I know the conversation you're referencing, though, Alex, with Jordan like taking issue with both of us about something.
Yes. No, because the one I had with you was over label sending free shit. Because it was like, how is that something you can complain about?
But you guys talked about it in the chat, and I was bothered, Brian, that you took the time to figure out what Jordan was going to say, because like we should be saving this for on mic. So that's why I just completely let the political science thing just sit.
I didn't really wanted to know. I was like, I don't remember like forcing anyone to say anything, but like
you just kept guessing until he was like, "Yeah, that's it." I remember you were like, "Was it this?
Yeah,
was it this?"
On it for sure.
You were like an ex-boyfriend trying to figure out why he dumped you or something. Like, wait a minute, was it this?
Okay.
It's because you did the popcorn trick to me.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, now that we got that out of the way, The Moon by Wooden Stars, is that right?
Mm-hmm. The Moon by Wooden Stars, that's right.
So can you give us maybe some background on this album, like how you came to discover it, why you've chosen it?
Sure. So this is a band that I think is criminally underappreciated, despite winning a Juno, which is Canada's Grammy, as Julie Doiron's backing band and sort of co-writers on her album. This is a band that I've been a fan of since the mid-90s. And, I feel like would put out one album every decade and then kind of like just never tour and presumably live their lives and do their day jobs or whatever. I think several of them were like professional musicians aside from being in this band as well. But yeah, I always just felt like they had a completely unique style that was kind of like half a little bit in that kind of like twinkle emo kind of like arpeggiated picking kind of thing. But then they had a lot of like, they use a lot of like dissonance and close harmony, and you can tell by a lot of the like chords and rhythms that these guys are like real capital M musicians, like classically or jazz trained. Like there's real fucking chops on these records. So the first time I heard them was on a compilation from a label called Raw Energy, which I think Sam and Joseph talked about at some point on their show. And so that was like an Ontario-based label that mostly dealt in punk rock, but they had a few kind of bands that were more on the indie rock end of things, like this band Dinner is Ruined that I suspect we'll end up talking about at some point, and then like the Wooden Stars. And so I heard that one track on a comp, which was a lot of times in those days how I would get into a band. and then kind of like over the years found their albums, starting with their second album, Mardi Gras. So this was their third album, and I think kind of their most quote unquote mature album. And yeah, I think that this album in particular, the first two songs are just really, really good. It really kind of encapsulates the nice variety of styles and kind of songs that they write. And it doesn't get as kind of like annoyingly dissonant and experimental as some of their earlier stuff does. Like I feel like this is their most accessible and pop album, even though there's still kind of some challenging moments in there in terms of what's going on musically. So a little bit more stuff about it. One of the vocalists, Mike Feuerstack, who's sort of the main vocalist, he did a side sort of solo project called Snail House for a long time, and now just plays music under his own name. And he was also extremely prolific under that alias. I feel like he would put out an album every 2 years or something over the last couple decades. And that is a really interesting contrast to how sporadically this band would put out music, because they're obviously really, really great songwriters. And it always felt like kind of a shame that like there's clearly all of these songs being written, but they just never kind of get the full band treatment. But yeah, that's kind of a not that brief, but still fairly brief encapsulation of my relationship with that band.
Okay.
Nice. That's cool. I guess, yeah, should I go first, or Alex, do you want to talk about?
Yeah, please. If you
Okay.
listened to it multiple times, supposedly as recently as 5.5 minutes ago. So
Yeah, while Jordan was talking, I was listening to it.
exactly.
Yeah, so like going into this right off the bat, I like got like Minus the Bear-ish vibes.
Oh, interesting.
Like the guitar tones, like the sort of math rocky kind of smooth, sort of like that kind of shimmery guitar kind of thing. I don't know how to explain it, but yeah, it's like the kind of softer side of like indie rock, I guess. I don't really know how to categorize this.
I would definitely call them an indie rock band. I think that's
Yeah.
safe.
Yeah, I think that's a safe term to use for sure. So just there's just so many like subgenres
Sure.
that I'm not kind of familiar with. Like, is this slowcore? I don't know what that is. Like,
is it new metal?
Exactly. Yeah. Um, but yeah, then like I quickly realized, oh, this isn't Minus the Berry, and I kind of lost interest. But then like the third song, I thought it kind of picked up again, and I was really getting into it. And yeah, like there are a lot of really like good highlights on this album, and it definitely kept my interest throughout the whole thing. But like, what was I gonna say? Like, yeah, this kind of stuff I can usually do, but like, this and like, it's not like this, but like, Pinback is another point of reference. For me, with like another example of this kind of style of like indie rock that I really enjoy. Yeah, it's like the 2010s like in your face stuff, like the Vampire Weekend, the Animal Collectives, like those just really just obnoxious in your face kind of indie rock stuff I just despise, and I think this is a really really nice like alternative to that. Just anytime I can like rant about indie rock, I will, like the current state of that music. Because I'm like kind of ignorant to a lot of it, but like I know like what the popular stuff kind of, but anytime I can shit on Vampire Weekend, I'll take that opportunity, because that's a band I just never understood the appeal of. Like, just listen to Paul Simon's Graceland. It's the same thing. If you want to hear like cultural appropriation, like of like African music, like, but that's a different podcast, I guess. Yeah, but I like this. This is like really, yeah, like they're really cool like indie rock. Like I like the it got when it got to like the centerpiece of the album where it's like that instrumental
Mm-hmm.
is where it kind of picks up again for me, and then it goes into that really long 6 minute kind of I hate this word experimental kind of thing where like the song just kind of falls apart and then
Sure.
just picks back up halfway through again. Like I thought that was really cool. Especially how like the previous song was all instrumental and then it goes right into the next song, which like at the beginning is very vocal like driven. So like that was pretty cool. So yeah, there's a lot of highlights on this thing. But like I didn't really know what to expect going into it. So like um yeah, I went to like the related artists on the Spotify and like I only recognized like one or two of the other names.
Mm-hmm.
So I had like no point of reference for any of this. So I was really like pleasantly surprised, I guess.
Brian,
That's
I'm
interesting.
interested. Uh,
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm just interested to get Brian's thoughts on if you heard any like jazz underpinnings here, because Jordan, you had mentioned that they're clearly capital M musicians with you know perhaps classic jazz training and whatnot. And I know the Fentuzler is secretly the jazz Tuzler, so I was just wondering if you heard any jazzy stuff here.
Um yeah, that wasn't like the it was like that wasn't the most obvious point of reference to me, but I can like hear it like here and there. Yeah, now that you mentioned it, I think that's definitely an influence on like this kind of style of indie rock for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, you can hear a lot of it in their older records too. That again, this is kind of their most accessible one. But yeah, Brian, there's a few points that you kind of touched on there that I wanted to kind of talk about. So you mentioned both math rock and slowcore. You kind of hear those influences a little bit. Um, while this is definitely like an indie rock band, they definitely had ties in those scenes. I don't know if you know that band Kepler that was on Trouble Man, that kind of slowcore band. There was also a band called Weights and Measures. They kind of shared musicians, and they were Michael's backup band on Snail House tours sometimes. So that's kind of interesting. And then yeah, you were also shoot, what was it that you had mentioned? God damn, I forgot now. I should have written it down. There's something else I was going to double back to. I'm sure I will in a few minutes when I remember.
I gotta charge my phone here. I'm moving from my desk to my bed because my phone charger is a fuck thing.
Oh,
So
I remembered what I was going to say. So, yeah, that was kind of something that you kind of alluded to, I guess, is that it's not that it's like none of the songs are really bad, but the album doesn't really flow, in my opinion. I love this album. I think it's great, but I think that it doesn't really flow that well as a coherent suite of songs. And I think that that's always been a problem that this band has, is because they do write in so many interesting styles, and then their albums do wind up being, except for this one, kind of overlong in parts and uneven, and they just don't flow because they're trying to like tick so many different boxes that they're interested in ticking. Um, and so, yeah, I think that this album does the best job of kind of like finding a coherent suite of songs to put together, and I think they also help themselves a lot by keeping it short. It's just a little over half an hour, but that's I think a weakness of all of their albums, is just kind of like sequencing and actually putting these songs together. So
So do
yeah,
you
that's
think it's a
interesting too.
sequencing issue, or do you just think it's just too many, I guess, varying styles going on, perhaps?
yeah, I mean, it becomes kind of a little from A and a little from B, right? Like
Okay.
if you took maybe like what if you took all the slow songs across the 4 or 5 albums or whatever it's that they've released? Could you make like one really interesting album that kind of flowed a little bit better out of the songs that complemented each other a little bit more than going from like a really kind of dissonant math rock song to a very kind of confessional, like depressive solo acoustic guitar thing or whatever. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So Alex, I'm curious about your thoughts.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this record. I actually thought this is funny actually because Brian was tweeting about this just earlier tonight. I thought they sounded a lot like the band Fastball.
Oh, really?
Yes, yeah. There was one song, I think it was
I didn't
Rebel
hear
Radio. So I was
that.
like, this sounds like it could be a Fastball song from their album Keep Your Wig On, which I'm sure most people have never heard that particular
So
Fastball album.
they have more than 2 songs, Fastball?
They do have
Wait,
more than
what's the
two
second
songs, yeah.
song?
The two that everyone knows are The Way and Out of My Head.
Which one's out of my head?
Was I out of my head? Was I out of Machine Gun Kelly sampled it a few years ago for a rap song, but it was it was probably their biggest hit in like 1998 maybe.
There was a follow-up hit, and I think that was the follow-up to the Way. Yeah,
The Way was their first big one. They were both from their 1997 album All the Pain Money Can Buy. I'm a huge Fastball fan. I think they're just one of the greatest bands ever.
I gathered. No, it's interesting because I never would have made that comparison in a million years. But now that you mention it, and just in particular reference to that one song, I can sort of see it a little bit. Because yeah, this like I said, this is their hookiest, most kind of pop-oriented album, and those first two songs in particular, I think are like really, really good kind of slices of like indie rock pop kind of stuff.
Sure. So that was my big takeaway. It was reminding me a lot of Fastball, especially because the song Rebel Radio, it reminds me of like a Fastball song where it's also about the radio. And I feel like there's multiple songs on this album where they mention the radio, like it's a motif they seem to return to. I think,
yeah.
But I couldn't find the lyrics online anywhere, and I was like listening while I was driving. But I swear they talk about it multiple times. So
yeah,
definitely. I was interested by that, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's something that that may kind of be more to do with Mike Feuerstack as a lyricist. So he's kind of the main songwriter and lyricist of this band. But Julian Bayard, the other guitarist and singer, sings obviously sometimes too. But yeah, like he is. Fuck, what was I just saying? What did I start this goddamn sentence with?
I mean, you said the radio thing was a byproduct of the lyricist.
Yes, right. Yeah, so that is, it's not, I think, kind of exclusive to this album. He has a few kind of like motifs that he kind of that he comes back to a lot in his lyrics, and the radio, for whatever reason, is one of those. Radios and transmissions and broadcasting, all of that sort of thing.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, continue. I kind of cut you off there.
No, I think that was pretty much the gist of it. I don't have I have no, much like Brian, I just have no frame of reference. Maybe even less. I mean, I said Fastball. Like Brian said, minus the bear. I don't even know what that means. Those words mean nothing to me. So I was like, yeah, this is like a good indie rock record that I really enjoy. I didn't think it was amazing. I wasn't like, yeah, I'm going to come back to this over and over again, but I thought it was really solid. And honestly, maybe a bit mainstream of a pick from you, given some of the other things we've listened to.
Sure.
Such as like K is for Catherine and the Trailer Park Boys rap album and all that stuff or whatever. So it was a little bit more, along the beaten path than I'm used to from you.
Yeah, a little more digestible. Yeah.
Yeah, well, this is, if it makes you feel any better, these guys definitely ate shit their entire careers and didn't make any money. So like I said, they're if anything kind of your textbook like critically recognized but commercially unsuccessful band. And I think that there's a lot of reasons for that. Part of that is how unusual a lot of their music is. They really kind of don't play into like traditional pop songwriting for the most part. And honestly, a lot of it I think is in the vocal timbre of the two vocalists, because I think that they are both good singers. They're both able to like hit the notes. They're both very interesting melody and harmony writers, but neither of them necessarily have marketable voices, if that makes sense. Just kind of like the quality of their voice isn't really like, it's not a pop vocal.
Yeah. Not to like go back to what Alex was saying, but the Semisonic album is really good too.
Nice. I'm gonna have to listen to all these albums I missed when I was in high school.
Why is this so funny? I'm so confused. How high are you?
Sorry. Go ahead. Go on. Anyway,
I'm very confused right now. I don't know what just
sorry,
happened.
just cut that out. Yeah.
I think I might have had a stroke.
Cut that out. Sorry. Yeah. I just really wanted to say the Semisonic album is really good too. When you said Fastball was good.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I just got really embarrassed because you said I was high, and then
because no one knows that. You've never like that's like usually our little secret. So I'll make sure to edit out the part where I ask if you're high.
Right. And then yeah. Anyway.
Okay.
I didn't mean to completely derail the conversation. The cat joined us though. So there's that.
Hey buddy, how's it going, Doom?
Hey Doom. No, she's in like her snuggle era though. So like that's good for her.
What a sweet kitty.
Right. Yeah, she just wanted to say hi. Now she's like now she's gonna leave.
But yeah, Brian, you were talking before about like the Spotify related artists the fans also likes. So yeah, there's a couple of bands in there. Eric's Trip's one of them. You got your North of Americas, you got your Inbreds. These are all amazing Canadian bands that I'm sure we'll talk about at some point. But yeah, Julie Doiron, who is the bass player from Eric's Trip and a wonderful solo artist in her own right, she's on I think 3 tracks on this album. I think she's on 1, 2, and 4, doing the harmonies on all that stuff. And yeah, she's a very, very talented singer-songwriter, someone you should definitely check out. And like I said, their collaborative album with the Wooden Stars, yeah, won a Juno, Canadian Grammy. Good stuff.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of Eric's Trip before. There's like I don't know what they sound like though.
Another indie rock band, but very, very lo-fi. They kind of really exemplify the like lo-fi 4-track scrappy indie rock band. I fucking love that band.
Oh, I'll have to give that a shot then. Yeah, yeah. I thought it seems like a noise. It sounded like a noise rock band just based on the name to me for some reason.
Well, because it's a Sonic Youth reference, right? So
that's exactly. Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was. Yeah, a reference to that. I don't know, like if they like were the same era or not. But yeah, I was wondering about that. But yeah.
Yeah, I think Eric's Trip formed in '89, and they have explicitly said though that the name is a reference to that track. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, they're a very cool band. Definitely check them out. Yeah, so I said earlier that this band Wood Stars did not tour much. I did get to see them. Christ, when would this have been? 2010, I want to say. They with this album took another like 11-year gap between records and finally put out what I assume will be their last album around 2010. And yeah, it was the one time I got to see them. They played a really great show, and of course they were the like half-hour slot opening act for a much larger band that was around for like 3 years and had far more success than them because the world's not a just place. So I don't know. Are either of you Winter Sleep fans? That's the band that I was referring to. Or have they even made it to the States? Yeah, I feel like
sounds familiar.
They're a kind of like indie rock, space rock-ish band, I guess. But yeah, I feel like they're a band that you wouldn't know because they're a band that kind of exists because of CanCon funding. That's unfair to say.
Now, is that like a bad thing to be CanCon funded, or like?
Well, not. I mean, it depends on how you look at it. I mean, it's like it's great because you're not going out of pocket. You get paid by the government to write and record and put out music. That's fucking awesome. On the other hand, that system that determines who gets those grants is extremely nepotistic and a closed system and a lot of favoritism and just kind of bullshit. Yeah, so it's just you know the Metric is going to get a shit ton of money every year, and you know some of it might trickle down to some other artists too.
Yeah, like yeah, I ask that because I could easily see people like using that against or using that as an excuse to talk shit on like an artist. Like I could use that. Just people are just being. I know how cynical people can be, so I just feel like that would be like a common way of talking shit
Yeah,
about a
it's
band.
absolutely our version of the industry plant criticism.
There you go. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I was thinking, yeah, because yeah, when you were talking about that, I was trying to think of a similar thing, and like, are you familiar with Show Me the Body?
No.
They're like, quote unquote hardcore band that they're signed to a major-ish label, and the dude that started that band does a lot of like quote unquote DIY efforts in like Brooklyn and stuff like that. But he comes from an extremely wealthy family. Like I don't know if they're billionaires, but like I don't know how much money they have, but like they're insanely wealthy, and like you see people shitting on that band specifically because of they're like inexplicably huge, and they use that exposure for good. They take like they've like toured with a lot of diverse artists and stuff like that, but like their music's terrible, and like they're like inexplicably like gigantic, and like are on like all the big festivals and stuff. And so I feel like there's like, yeah, that is part of like a larger conversation about like money be behind, you know, DIY, you know, aesthetics and stuff like that, and music and shit.
Mm-hmm.
And like yeah, like what like yeah, if it's like, or like, you know, like the ethical, you know, like question of like around that, you know.
Yeah, you know, like is it okay to be a shitty industry plant and a nepotism product if you use that platform to help out other people that quote unquote deserve it more?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Like yeah, like they like are touring with like bands that I like, you know, all the time, but like you couldn't like catch me at a Show Me the Body show otherwise.
I'm just thinking about Jerry Maguire saying that.
Exactly.
Took a sec there, but
Um,
Alex got it.
I got it. I was thinking about, I thought it was like a Jerry Maguire hardcore band reference. And I was like, I've never seen the movie, so I guess is there a scene where he's like listening to
Oh.
hardcore? And then I was like, oh, right, we're talking about a band called Show Me the Body. So it took me a second to get that. I was too busy trying to think about Tom Cruise listening to hardcore with Cuba Gooding Jr., I guess.
I would okay. Let's recut the fucking what's it called, risky business floor slide underwear dance, but he's listening to like YDI or something.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Cut it so it looks like he's two stepping, speed it up a lot.
Right.
I didn't know until recently that YDI still plays shows in the Philly area.
That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, my friends, yeah, opened for them.
Nice.
Yeah, they're really good. But yeah, that yeah, why isn't that a big meme of like the what the risky business? Why, like just to different songs? Like why isn't that a huge meme?
I think because
We're
he's
afraid
singing
of
along to it, right?
Scientologists.
No, yeah, it's true. He's a Scientologist. Yeah,
And so we're afraid of that.
yeah.
Can't poke fun at him or else
Well, the dude from the '70s show, he's going down. He's a Scientologist. He's on trial right now.
it was a hung jury.
Wait, what? Really?
Yeah, that was I
Oh
got a
shit, I
push
haven't been
notification on
following
that
that close.
yesterday.
But... Oh wow, fuck, those damn Scientologists. Cut that out. I didn't say
Right? Exactly. You're scared of them.
that. Yeah, that's yeah. That's see. You haven't heard Kanye say anything bad about them yet.
We're gonna find out that Jordan's a Scientologist. That's what we're gonna find out after this episode.
God, let me just say that if I was a Scientologist, both this podcast and my other one would be doing real fucking numbers because we'd have some clout, right? We'd have
Right.
that Scientology
Yeah.
machine behind us.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. Very true.
But yeah, well, I don't have a whole heck of a lot else to talk about the Wooden Stars. I've kind of said my piece. They're a very excellent, in my opinion, underrated band. But I can understand why they kind of like never found really kind of success because they're just A, not that marketable. B, they took a decade between albums, and
Right.
C, their albums were kind of hard to get into at times. So it's not exactly a recipe for success.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. Yeah. Yeah.
All
I didn't
right.
have any other notes either, other than
No.
yeah. I didn't really care for the last track very much. It didn't really
Really, I
end on
love
like
that song.
really. Yeah. I didn't. Maybe I just stopped paying attention by the end, and I was just like, oh, there's the end. But yeah, it didn't really grab me. I don't know.
No,
You were
that
asleep, I'm sure. So
I
No,
think that
no,
it
I was okay. To be fair, I did fall asleep to this album multiple times, and this is the first time I think I heard it all the way through.
mm-hmm.
I think
So
that song suffers from poor sequencing because the song before it is a lot more high energy.
yeah,
It
yeah,
really kind of slams the brakes on. And again, that's where I think that like, what if we had a Wooden Stars album that was 10 like kind of down tempo or slow or these kind of like sad songs? That I think would be really cool. But you get kind of these mishmashes, which is great. It shows off the range of the band and they're good songs. But I think that it's what makes these albums less cohesive than I'd like is that they're not songs that intuitively belong together necessarily to me.
Yeah.
yeah. No, yeah. I kind of like felt the opposite when you said like, yeah, I would want like a whole album of like the more slower stuff because like I like what yeah like I didn't really like I started to think like I when it got like to like the slower part of like the first leg of the album I was like I mean I don't know if I can do a whole album like this and then it got to like the fourth track and I was like oh this is starting to pick up a little bit more so I kind of liked how they kind of explored different moods and styles and
Hmm.
stuff like that so yeah like yeah it does yeah I guess this is like a album that showcases, I guess, the range of their talents or whatever, compared to like other albums more just focused.
I think that this album is definitely the most focused. If
Oh wow!
anything, the other albums they're quite long for one thing. Like the other two albums are close to 70 minutes. I think they're like
Jesus
16 to
Christ.
18 tracks, and there is a lot more kind of like a lot more experimentation, a lot more dissonance, a lot more kind of like again just kind of like showing off your chops for lack of a better word. It's not that it's not welcome, but it gets kind of wanky at times, right? Um, so yeah, I think that like this is uh for better and worse, their most kind of cohesive album, as crazy as that might sound.
Huh.
Yeah, I think maybe I'll make that a challenge for myself as I'll put together a little Spotify playlist of like what would a Wooden Stars album that I think makes sense sound like and sequence
Oh,
one out of their different records. So that's a little challenge I'll maybe make for myself that you guys can put in the notes on the episode or something.
there
Okay.
you go.
Oh, that'd
Yeah,
be cool.
yeah.
All
Cool.
right.
Well,
Well,
that's all I got.
perfect. Well, thank you for joining us as always on our once every 4 month edition of the United States Canada Free Exchange of Podcast Content. Yeah, I guess take off, hoser.
Take off, hosers.
The Harvey Danger album's really good too.